Hello, welcome class 6 to our today's social studies lesson. And our today's lesson is a continuation of what we've been learning. And remember, throughout last week and the previous week, we've been looking at crops which are grown within Eastern Africa. And some of the crops that we've already discussed is coffee in Kenya and Ethiopia. We've also discussed sisal in Kenya and Tanzania. We've discussed banana growing in Kenya and Uganda. So today we are going to look at a new crop which is grown within Eastern Africa. And the crop that I want us to discuss today is sugarcane. I want us to discuss sugarcane growing in Kenya and in Sudan. Sugarcane growing in Kenya and Sudan. So that a quiet place. Make sure that you take your notebook and if possible also your textbook and take the notes. Make sure that you also take the notes as we will be discussing them. So we want to start with the introduction part of our lesson. Of course, our subtopic is sugarcane growing. Our subtopic is sugarcane growing in Kenya and Sudan. Sugarcane growing in Kenya and Sudan. That is our subtopic today. Now, this is a crop which originated from Asia. So sugarcane is not an indigenous crop in Africa, no. This is a crop which was introduced by the Indians. It was introduced to Africa by the Indians from Asia. It is a crop which was introduced to Africa by the Indians who came from Asia. It is a crop. This is a crop which grows both under natural conditions and it also grows under irrigation. So it can be grown under irrigation. At the same time, it is a crop which can also be grown under natural conditions and be grown under natural conditions, and it can also be grown under irrigation. Sugar companies grow sugarcane on large farms. You know, sugar companies cannot just depend on the sugarcane from the farmers only, no. So it must also own its own field or its own place where they grow sugarcane. And the places or the farms set aside by sugar companies where sugarcane is grown, those farms are known as estates or plantations or nucleus. So they have how many names? They have three names. They are called estates or plantations or nucleus. Sugarcane companies grow sugarcane on large farms called estates, plantations, or nucleus. And then apart from these large farms that companies own, we have also small-scale farmers who grow sugarcane. And these people, the small-scale farmers, the people who do sugarcane farming on small pieces of farms, they are called outgrowers. Then lastly, sugarcane in Sudan is mainly grown under irrigation. And we will know more, or we will discuss more about sugarcane in Sudan later during the lesson. But what you have to know is sugarcane in Sudan is mainly grown under irrigation, but in Kenya, this is a crop which grows under natural conditions. So in Kenya, it grows under natural conditions, but in Sudan, it is a crop which is grown under irrigation. Moving forward, we have got conditions favoring growth of sugarcane. Plus, we've been discussing so many crops. We've been discussing so many crops, and we've already discussed coffee in Ethiopia. We said that we have got two types of coffee. We have coffee Arabica and we have coffee Robusta. We said coffee Arabica, this is a crop which is grown in highlands, but coffee Robusta is a crop which grows in lowlands. And if you are very clever enough, you know the climatic conditions of highlands, and you also know the climatic conditions of lowlands. Starting with highlands, everybody knows that highlands, especially on the windward side of the mountain, the highlands, they receive a lot of rainfall, relief type of rainfall or orographic type of rainfall. And highlands are always very cool because the higher you go, the cooler it becomes. That is a scientific phenomenon which everybody knows. You've been hearing that the higher you go, the cooler it becomes since when you were in class 4. So highlands are always very cool. So when you hear that a crop requires high altitude, this is a crop which grows well in cool and wet areas. But when you hear that a crop requires a low altitude, that is a crop that requires a hot climate. So when you are discussing conditions favoring growth of different crops, it is upon you to classify if this crop is a highland crop or it is a lowland crop. Some crops are both highland and lowland, but when we are giving the conditions favoring growth of some crops, we always try to make you understand if this is a highland crop, what are the conditions? If it is a lowland crop, what are the conditions that are required? For example, coffee. Coffee, we said Arabica grows in highlands, Robusta grows in lowlands. So if someone gives you conditions favoring growth of coffee, it is upon you to know which coffee are they asking me. If you are asked conditions favoring the growth of bananas, what is banana a highland crop or a lowland crop? It is now upon you to understand the basics when you are dealing with the conditions favoring different types of crops. Let us continue. What are some of the factors which favor, or what are some of the conditions which favor the growth of sugarcane? Number one, this is a crop which requires an altitude of up to 1,700 meters above the sea level. So this is not high altitude. This is not high altitude. Remember, coffee, we said it is 1,200 to 2,500 there. So coffee, it requires a lot of altitude. That's why it requires cool and wet temperature. But sugarcane, there's a crop. The highest altitude that it requires is 1,700 meters, and that is above the sea level. So any altitude above 1,700 meters, that one is not suitable for the growing of sugarcane. This is also a crop which requires deep, well-drained, fertile soil. Of course, all crops require fertile soil. There is no crop which does not need unfertile soil. So unless if you are just not okay, you can talk of unfertile soil. Do we have any crop that requires unfertile soil? No. High temperature of about 20 to 27 degrees. It also requires a high rainfall of between 1,000 millimeters to 1,500 millimeters. This is a crop which requires a warm, dry season before harvesting, and also it requires a flat land. Also, it requires a flat land which is gently sloping, and lastly, it requires a wet and hot climate. To continue with the lesson, we have got other factors. Sugarcane growing in Sudan. Kenana is the leading producer and exporter of sugarcane. Is the leading producer of sugarcane in Africa. Sudan is the leading producer and exporter of sugarcane in Africa. Sugarcane in Africa is mainly grown at Kenana irrigation. Sugarcane in Sudan, sorry, not in Africa. Sugarcane in Sudan is mainly grown at Kenana irrigation scheme. So Kenana irrigation scheme, and take note of this, this is the largest irrigation scheme, the largest sugarcane irrigation scheme in Africa. Kenana irrigation scheme, which is found in Sudan, and this is an irrigation scheme which is just behind Sena Dam in Sudan, and it receives its water from the Blue Nile, and Sena Dam. I think that's the last point I've indicated there. Kenana Sugar Company owns most of the sugar estate where sugarcane is grown. And then sugarcane growing in Sudan is mechanized. When we talk of mechanized class, what is the meaning of mechanized? Mechanized comes from the word machine. So sugarcane growing in Sudan, machines are mostly involved. It requires a lot of machines, unlike human labor. Water for irrigation comes from the Blue Nile and Sena Dam, And then sugarcane growing areas in Sudan are mainly Kenana, Blue Nile Valley, and Atbara Valley. So the point where if this is the River Nile, and this is the Blue Nile, so the scheme is found between this place. So when they draw a River Nile and then they shade the point where the Blue Nile and the White Nile meet, this point is where we have Kenana irrigation scheme. Kenana irrigation scheme in Sudan. Those are the place, that is the place where this irrigation scheme is found. And the main crop which is grown there, I've said it is a sugarcane. So sugarcane growing areas in Sudan are mainly Kenana, which I've said it is the largest sugarcane irrigation scheme in Africa. And then we also have the Blue Nile Valley and we have the Atbara Valley. So those are the areas where sugarcane is grown. Make sure that you have those notes in your book, and we will be discussing more about sugarcane once we get a question in exam. Otherwise, have a good time. Till we meet next time. Stay safe and make sure that you continue revising. Good evening.